Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. College football semifinals tonight and tomorrow night. Who better to handicap those games with than Paul Stone, who's been kind enough to join us all college football season long, and he continues with that all the way through the national championship. Check him out at Paul Stone Sports. Also does college basketball as well, so make sure you check out his programs online there. Paul, great to have you back here on NewsWire. Really appreciate it, and I know that the Hurricanes fans certainly appreciate you. You picked them ironically, I think, if I'm not mistaken, to beat Texas A&M, and then you took them against the spread against Ohio State, saying that they could win that game too. And so, are you going to do it 3 times in a row here? I mean, Miami fans are loving those picks, but certainly they have not gone up against an offense, I don't think, like Mississippi, like they will tonight. The Canes are 3.5 point favorites, but this is a very high total, 52.5 in this. The odds makers, are they telling us, Paul, that Miami could play well, but that no matter what they do, the Rebs are going to score tonight? It certainly seems to be with the total that I see here, right?
I tell you, it's such an intriguing matchup, Craig, when you look at how well Miami has been playing on defense and going up against an offense in Ole Miss that has perhaps, and no disrespect to Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Fernando Mendoza, but Ole Miss perhaps has the hottest quarterback in all of college football in Trinidad Chambliss. And man, it's going to be such an intriguing matchup again, seeing Chambliss and Ole Miss's high octane score quite a few points offense going against Miami's defense, as good as the Canes played in those first 2 victories, upset victories over both Texas A&M and Ohio State. I have been bullish on the Canes in the playoffs, but that's about to change with my recommendation here. In the first 2 games, obviously Miami was the underdog. Now they're wearing the favorites tag, favored by either 3.5 or 3 points. And you look at it, and not only is it Trinidad Chambliss versus that Miami defense, I think even more specifically, it's how does Ole Miss and Trinidad Chambliss respond to that Miami pass rush? Because Miami's pass rush has been critical to their season-long success, and especially their success in the last 2 games. 46 sacks on the year. The Canes averaged 3.4 sacks a game, which is third nationally. Akeem Mesidor, 10.5 sacks on the year. Reuben Bain Jr., not far behind at 8.5. A couple of guys who could be Thursday night draft picks in the upcoming April NFL draft. So how does Ole Miss combat that? And I think what they're going to do is I think Trinidad Chambliss is going to run the football some tonight. Early in the year, I think Ole Miss, I'll back up here. First of all, Ole Miss's starting quarterback to start the year was Austin Simmons. Starts the
Okay.
first 2 games of this season for the Rebels, injures his ankle. Then Trinidad Chambliss comes in. And I think at first, Lane Kiffin, the then Ole Miss coach, and the Rebels thought that they had a guy in Trinidad Chambliss, the Ferris State transfer from Division II football. I think they thought they had more of an athlete than a quarterback. So he ran a lot late, early on in the season. He actually averaged 13 and a half carries a game in his first 4 games, 54 carries in those 4 games. Had in the month of September alone, 62 yards rushing against Arkansas, 112 yards rushing in the first meeting against Tulane, 71 against LSU. But down the stretch, is they found out Trinidad Chambliss is a well-rounded quarterback, a guy who can play the position. They found out they had a passer. So Chambliss, after averaging 13 and a half carries in his first 4 games, only 6.2 carries in his last 5. So he's not carrying the ball nearly as much. But tonight he's going to, because when a team brings that all-out pass rush, guys coming from the edge, trying to wrap around the tackles and beat them to the spot and those types of things, the way to combat that is to run the quarterback, and not just on plays where he uses his escapability and scrambling ability to run, but on scripted running plays, whether it be a quarterback draw or some other type of designed run. I think they're going to run Trinidad Chambliss. I think it's going to be they're going to score some points. Is Ole Miss? I'm not sure Miami's quite revved up enough to keep up with the Rebels. I think the Rebels are going to win tonight over Miami, but I recommend Mississippi plus the points, +3 or +3.5, maybe for half your unit, and then maybe use the other half unit on Ole Miss at plus money on the money line.
Should be a fun game tonight. Second half of that game against Georgia was really Chambliss's star game, I thought, the way that he played, especially down the stretch in that one. And so Paul says he likes the Rebels tonight against Miami. Meanwhile, almost identical line on Friday night in the other semifinal matchup, Paul, between Oregon and Indiana. The Ducks, who have been in this spot many times before in the old BCS championship, and Dan Lanning has played for these things. He knows how it works, but I mean, they got the hottest team going right now in all of college football. Indiana beats Ohio State. They win last week at the playoff game. Mendoza, I mean, I don't know what Mendoza is in the future, honestly, but in college right now, he's like perfect. He's the perfect quarterback. Doesn't make mistakes, always completing passes. And then when they get a lead, they just run the ball. The game ends, Paul. So what happens tonight in the semifinal game? Total of 48 and a half. It just seems as though this kid Mendoza is unflappable.
Yeah, I tell you, we have two great matchups, Craig, without question. I mean, the Ole Miss Miami game has plenty of intrigue, and this game, a matchup of Big Ten schools, Oregon and Indiana, just great theater. And you've got two quarterbacks. You mentioned Fernando Mendoza, but Dante Moore for Oregon. This is a guy who is, signed with UCLA out of high school as a true freshman in 2023. I believe he started 5 games for the Bruins, not a real good UCLA team. So he took his bumps and bruises. Last year, after transferring to Oregon, he sits behind Dylan Gabriel, hardly plays. So the point I'm really getting to is the fact Dante Moore, although highly recruited, a 5-star guy, he hadn't really played a whole lot of football until this season. And we've seen that maturation and that development, I think, the second half of the season, rather. And I mean, again, 3 of these quarterbacks, not to knock Carson Beck's because he's got some talent in his own right. But man, you look at these 2 quarterbacks in the Friday semifinal, Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman Trophy winner for Indiana, and then Dante Moore for Oregon. And then also, of course, Ole Miss's Trinidad Chambliss. We got some big time quarterbacks. And in this game, this is a rematch of an earlier game played the second Saturday in October when Indiana travels to Eugene to Autzen Stadium to play Oregon as a 7-point underdog. Oregon actually tied that game early in the fourth quarter. Brandon Finney Jr. Picks off a Fernando Mendoza pass, returns at 35 yards. The game's tied at 20. Indiana, though, in true Indiana fashion, they drive 75 yards in 12 plays on the ensuing drive, take the lead, ultimately win that game 30-20. Looking at that game, man, was Indiana's defense impressive. In the game, they give up just 267 yards total, allow the Ducks only 4.2 yards per play. Oregon only 3 of 14 on third down at home against Indiana in that loss. And the Hoosiers defense was especially nasty in the second half. In the second half, the Ducks only 64 total yards on 27 plays, 2.4 yards per play. So just a huge effort by that Indiana defense. But now the question is, what does round 2 look like? Teams make adjustments. You've got 2 great coaching staffs here. So what will this one look like? Both teams coming off big victories. Oregon throttled Alabama 38-3 in their quarterfinal matchup. Oregon blanked Texas Tech. The Red Raiders couldn't move the ball at all. Oregon wins that game 23-0. But I really like this Indiana defense. I think that's going to be the difference. I like kind of 2 plays here. The play that I like the most is going to be the total. I like this game to go under 48.5. And then I like Indiana minus 3.5. I just can't fade Kirk Cignetti. I like, I'm going to keep going with the Hoosiers until they prove me wrong. And again, like the under the best, and then Indiana as the side.
Yeah, either way, it will be a fun national championship, and we'll check back in with you, Paul, for that. Thanks again for coming on NewsWire. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you guys. Good luck and enjoy the semifinal games.
And welcome back to NewsWire here on Sports Grid as we begin a weekend of college football and pro football all the way through Monday. The first of the extravaganza of games is up next. It's the University of Miami in the college football semifinal taking on Mississippi as we bring in Manny Navarro from The Athletic, who is racking up the frequent flyer miles, going all over the country covering the Miami Hurricanes. Manny, it's great to see you here. I mean, I think it's fair to say a lot of folks should be surprised with how well the Hurricanes have played. First, we go back about a month ago, and it didn't look like they were going to get into the playoff, and then they did. And then they go to Texas A&M, They beat that team, and then the shocker of all shockers was them taking out the number 2 team in the country in Ohio State, a 10-point underdog essentially in that game, and a game where Miami looked like the far superior team. What a journey it's been.
Yeah, it's really proven to me that these playoffs are all about matchups, right? And I think Miami exposed Ohio State's weakness, which was their offensive line. And that first half, getting out to that 14-0 lead was huge. And they were able to make just enough plays to hold on to pull off the upset. And credit to Mario Cristobal, who spent 4 years building this thing, focusing on the offensive and defensive lines. And they've got a chance now to win the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean, going back to that whole debate over Miami versus Notre Dame, I mean, Miami beating Notre Dame was the reason that they got in. But Manny, I think it's fair to say, and it's definitely unusual in this day and age of not just pro football, but college football as well, to see a team riding a defense to a potential final and even a championship. Usually when you look at it, Manny, it's like, all right, do they put in 30, 40 points a game? How many points are they scoring? Do they have the Heisman winner? And yes, Indiana in the end may be there. But the Hurricanes really, Manny, have done it on the strength of that defense. And, look, going into the season, everyone knew that Ruben Bain was a great player, but it hasn't been just him. And they're using pick sixes and everything else to get there. So to me, I don't know if it surprised you, but it does, because watching them during the regular season, I didn't see any indication that all of a sudden the Hurricanes would have the best defense going in all of college football.
Yeah, credit to Corey Heatherman and just the job he did. You think back to last season and how bad that defense looked at the end of the year, blowing a 21-point lead at Syracuse. But he came in and he really simplified things for a lot of the guys in the secondary. They did a great job recruiting through the transfer portal to load up in the secondary. And so they've got the whole thing. I mean, they've got the whole package. All three layers of that defense are playing at an extremely high level. And I think the key in all this has been the complementary running game with Mark Fletcher, because Miami's been able to play a ball possession type game and trim down the amount of chances their opponents get.
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it. So let's go back real quick before we go forward to Mississippi. Let's go back to that game, as you mentioned, against Ohio State, where the Hurricanes basically took control of the game early on, and it really required a lot of effort. And I think that's why, in the end, the Buckeyes lost, is how much effort it took for them to actually get back in that game. What did you see from that game that sort of was the game changer that led to their win in that one?
Yeah, again, I think it was certainly the running game for Miami. They were 7 of 14 on third down. They converted, in a lot of tough situations. Carson Beck didn't throw for a lot of yards, but he was super effective on third down. Even used his legs one time early in the fourth quarter to convert a 3rd and 11 with a 12-yard run. So they're just playing scrappy right now on that side of the football, and they're doing so much on the defensive side. Obviously, producing 7 points, against Texas A&M. They had takeaways in the red zone, a blocked field goal. They're just making the most of every opportunity and just shutting other teams down and not allowing them to sort of get off and run.
Is it fair to say that Beck has played okay, but he's played fantastic when the biggest moments have come? It feels like that's been his story so far.
Absolutely. I think you go back to the SMU game, the interceptions in that game, one of them was his fault, not both of them. One of them went off his receiver's hands. Anyway, he's only had one interception since that game, and that was at the end against Pittsburgh. It was kind of a late moment deal, and he's just been really smart with the football, really making sure to protect it and making the most of it. And even against Texas A&M, right? They were having trouble throwing into that stiff wind of like 20 to 30 miles an hour the whole game, and he went to Miami's offensive coordinator, Shannon Dawson, and said, hey, let's run the football. Let's run it right up the gut. And what happens? Mark Fletcher rips off that long run, and all of a sudden Miami's in position to win the game.
Yeah, so I think wind won't be a factor coming up Thursday night here. So and I've been to that stadium and I've seen some championship games there. I saw the Gators beat Ohio State actually in that place there too, in Glendale, Arizona. It's a dome. And naturally, the biggest surprise maybe was Miami getting to this point. But Manny, as you probably know, the odds makers have decided that they're better than Mississippi, because it is a neutral site game, and the Hurricanes, it's a small line here, but they are favored against Mississippi going into the game. And so when you look at this matchup, I think it kind of feels very similar to the last two games. In order for Miami to win, they're going to have to play defense. Now, the quality of quarterback maybe in Chambliss for Mississippi, maybe a little bit higher than saying at Ohio State, maybe better than the Texas A&M quarterback. But if history tells us anything over the last two games and they get pressure on this kid, it may end up being the same result. But the challenge is definitely more significant, I would say, going into this one.
Yeah, I think right now, if we were to do the Heisman voting over again, Trinidad Chambliss would be right there with Fernando Mendoza, especially coming off of that performance against Georgia, where he was just so evasive when he was pressured. One stat here to know going into this game: Miami and Ole Miss are number one and number two in terms of pass protection and allowing the fewest pressures in the country. So while Miami has an outstanding defensive line, Ole Miss is right behind Miami when it comes to protecting the quarterback, number two in the country. So this is not going to be an easy challenge for Miami to get to the quarterback. This is going to be their toughest challenge of the season. Obviously, they've got a great challenge every single week in practice going up against Francis Mauigoa and Inez Cooper and big Markel Bell, the 6'9", 300+ pound left tackle. But Ole Miss can protect Trinidad, and he's elusive. And so to me, the key to this game will be Miami shutting down Ole Miss's running game and forcing Chambliss to have to make throws.
Yeah, he was fantastic in that second half and at the end of the game against Georgia, and single-handedly I think won the game for them in the end. Georgia, of course, had to come back, make it close. It was a fantastic game. So, Manny does cover college football here, not just the Hurricanes. He is, of course, going to be in the house in Glendale to watch the semifinal. If the Hurricanes win, by the way, Manny doesn't have to travel anywhere because the Hurricanes would then play for the national championship January the 19th at Hard Rock Stadium, which is where it is. But as we sort of expand this conversation, and that aside, because that would just be lucky, that aside, what do you make of the playoff thus far? And what do you make of this format and teams playing like at neutral sites, having to travel all over the country? I'm sure a month ago this was a lot more of a hot topic, but now that Miami's gotten so far, there's really not a lot of discourse. It seems like everyone understands they deserve to be in. What do you think? Is there a change coming? Do you think more teams, less teams, playing at home, playing on the road? What do you make of it so far?
Yeah, I think one issue certainly has been travel, right? Oregon, especially, they had to come all the way to Miami to play in the quarterfinal. They've got to fly to Atlanta this week to go play in the Peach Bowl. And if they win and they beat Indiana, which I know they're the underdog in that game, they're going to have to fly all the way back to Miami again to play in the national championship. I think something is going to happen in regards to having more games played on campuses. And I also think that field will probably expand to 16 teams. But
Yeah.
look, the College Football Playoff Committee and everybody behind the scenes discussing this, including the commissioners, have a lot more work to do, I think, before they get to a resolution they can all agree upon.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So, Manny, in the end, I know that, partially covering the Hurricanes makes you believe that you'd like to see them in the national championship. I think I understand that. Everybody in South Florida would too. Do you anticipate a close game in this one? Do you think the line indicates that?
Yeah, I picked Miami to win this game 31-30. They're going to have to score points to beat Ole Miss. Ole Miss scores against everybody. Like I said, they play a super high-paced offense. So I think Miami will prevail. They're 0-4 all-time at the Fiesta Bowl, but I think they've got the talent on both sides of the line pretty much to survive.
No fatigues in this one. See that, Manny. Thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the game.